For as long as I can remember, there has always existed a two-sided spectrum in Dota that every player tends to fall on. On the far left, you have heralds, and on the far right, you also have heralds. And that's because this spectrum has very little to do with MMR or anything like that. Rather, it has to do with the pace at which you play the game. And by the pace, I mean the combined speed of your teammates, of the enemies, and of the heroes in the game. Spectre, for example, is a slow-paced hero, but Beastmaster is a fast-paced hero. Somewhere in the middle of this spectrum, you have pro players. Or rather, it's convenient for us to simply define that pro players are the middle of this spectrum. And this is for the sole purpose of understanding why some of us lose games, despite feeling like we actually played really well in them and our KDA is high and so forth. In fact, I would argue that out of all the players in Dota 2, the closest player to the absolute middle of this spectrum is Arteezy. When it comes to the left side of the spectrum, it's really easy to understand why falling here is so game-losing. If you play slower than your enemies, then they're going to get to towers before you're ready to defend them, they're going to take Roshan before you even think that they could be doing it, and so forth. And since Dota is an objective-based and also snowbally game, if you start losing objectives simply because you're too slow to defend them, well, of course you're going to lose very quickly. The right side of the spectrum, however, man, what a place it is to be. This is the abyss. Falling here on the spectrum is like being sucked into a supermassive black hole and being stuck in time at the last possible Planck second on the event horizon for the rest of eternity. Sorry, I've been watching way too much Dark on Netflix. I would highly recommend that show, by the way. But anyway, I digress. The point that I want to make in this video is that you might be a player that is playing too fast for your games. And I know that's going to sound insane to some people, but hear me out. In simple terms, I'm basically saying that you might be too big brain for a small brain bracket. How do you know if you're one of these people? Well, if you ever TP in to defend a tower that you think should probably be defended, and you walk in and feed because your idiot teammates wasted their TP scrolls to farm the triangle together, then you're probably one of these people. I do want to note that this is obviously still feeding, and it's still, by definition, bad, but it's not for a reason that's really entirely your fault. The worst part about this is that a lot of people get stuck endlessly plateauing at a certain MMR because they don't feel like what they're doing is really bad, and that's because it's kind of a gray area. And this isn't just a pub problem. This is a problem that persists all the way up until Tier 1 Dota, and that's because sometimes it's just hard or even impossible to determine the pace of the enemies, and also sometimes you're just moving at a faster pace than your teammates, even in competitive. So now that we've talked about the problem, what's the solution? Nothing. And by that, I don't mean that there is no solution, I mean literally doing nothing is the solution. There's a subtle little trick that Arteezy does in every single game. Honestly, a lot of pro players do it, it's just that Arteezy has mastered it. This is arguably the biggest reason that he is almost always the most farmed player in the game. It's not farming patterns, it's this. This trick is called woodsmanning. The TLDR is that there are periods in Dota where you lack information and nothing is happening, genuinely nothing, and that's okay. Bad players in these moments will get bored and they'll go feed. Good players in these moments will wait patiently for some sort of information to present itself, and then they'll take some sort of action. And basically what Arteezy used to do a lot before we were in a heavy fighting patch is he would be playing something like Spectre, Anti-Mage, he'd be split pushing a side lane, the enemy team would not show themselves on the map, so it's like, okay, well, do I want to leave this area because they could be here? No, because maybe I teleport bot, and then all of a sudden they're bot, and now I can't farm because I just TP'd to exactly where the enemy team is. But I also don't want to just be standing here in the trees or showing on the wave, because if they're up here, then they can kill me. So what do? I woodsman. I become a lumberjack. I use my quelling blade, and I cut through as many trees as possible, and I make as many paths as possible, just so that way, if the enemy team does find me, if I go out and let's say I cut this creep wave and I make the wrong decision, okay, well, the enemy team is here, then I can run through here, and I have this path that I can follow. This woodsmanning word or concept is just because this is what I first saw Arteezy doing. But really, he does this by standing on high grounds. He does this by just hiding in trees behind towers. Basically, what he does is if he's ever in a situation where he doesn't know where the enemy team is on the map, he doesn't just react instantly and go somewhere where there's farm, of course, because he's a carry player. He will wait. He will wait for information to present itself, and then when it does, he will try to get the most possible given his good aggressive position that he didn't have to give up because he was hiding. So here we have a game between Quincy Crew and EG. This was that game in BTS Pro Series where Arteezy jumped into the Roche pit, stole Refresher, stole Aegis with the Chronosphere, jumped out, used Refresher Shard, then hit like a 4 or 5 man Chrono with the stolen Refresher Shard to win the game. It was absolutely insane. And in my opinion, the reasoning behind and the logic behind woodsmanning is exactly why Arteezy was able to make such a big play. Basically, what I'm doing in this video is I'm advocating for patience and consuming of information in Dota 2. But let's take a look at this clip and I'll show you exactly what it is to be a woodsman in Dota 2. So he hasn't started doing it quite yet. He's just chilling. He's farming. He's sitting in ancient camp. This is typical carry stuff. Jumps over, hits the hard camp. Still looking around the map and just processing information because, hey, why not? And here is where the woodsmanning begins. And the reason that he's doing this is because if we look around the map, we are in a particular game state that I'm sure every single carry player is familiar with. There are no camps to farm. And so what would a bad carry player do right now? Well, they probably TP towards this top lane because, hey, that's where the fastest farm is going to be, is if I TP up here and push this lane out. But guess what? Arteezy is playing this area because he has an idea about the game and he wants to play here for a reason, and he's going to stick to it, even if it means that he's going to have, I don't know, 50 less GPM or whatever. And that's the funny thing, is that it actually results in way more GPM. But let's take a look at what he does. He just stands on a high ground. His hero, completely vacant, doing almost nothing. He doesn't even issue a move command. He just walks down the hill, and he moves his camera around the map and just processes information in this moment, because why not? He's doing literally nothing. And then he sees a smoke because of this. He pings it out and he walks towards this tier 1. And still, he's not farming. He's a carry player, and I'm telling you that this gives you more farm, and he's doing absolutely nothing. He hasn't gotten bored because there's no creeps to hit and walked into the enemies. He is avoiding this gank. And then finally, the enemy team reveals himself. What happened there is he avoided a gank. That's exactly what happened there, by doing nothing. And I cannot stress how incredibly important that is. The amount of people that just think that they need to always be hitting a neutral camp or always be hitting a wave of lane creeps, it's unfathomable. People feed so much because they think that they have to do this as a carry. It's fine if your support's getting farm. It's fine if your offlaner's taking the only farm on the map because that farm happens to be dangerous and your life is more important than risking it to get that farm. So this next clip is a Roshan battle. This is not the one where Arteezy steals the Aegis. This is one before that. However, he carried this Roche fight for sure, and it's just because of his patience. And it's a very absolute thing. You know, these Dota players, they have this idea that the next objective is Roche. If we lose this Roche, we are going to lose the game. So what am I going to do? Am I going to get bored and fidgety and move around and potentially put myself on a low ground or out of position so the enemy team can go on me? Absolutely not. Watch what Arteezy does. Okay, we can look that his camera is moving around and processing information, but I just want to show you what his hero does. We're going to watch this entire clip. This is what he does for a long time, because there's no better place for him to be. No amount of farm is worth giving up this Roche. And then finally, we get the information that he was waiting for, which is that Quincy was doing a wraparound play, and because Roche was low enough, this lets Arteezy make the call that he's going to go in and take the Aegis. He's going to go in and kill Roshan. And so now we have a cheese, we have a refresher, and an Aegis on EG, and the game, of course, is significantly easier. And I know it looks crazy, but the amount of coaching sessions that I've done where people get bored and they just go hit a creep camp, or they walk to a creep wave or they walk down a high ground and into a low ground. Literally just stand in the right position around the right objective, and eventually you will get the information you need to make a good decision. So that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I do want to just quickly give you guys an update on the hobo situation. They have started hiding in the alleyways by my house on the way to the garbage bins, and they're throwing live hornets at me. So it's getting very expensive to pay for all of these hospitalization bills that are coming from these hornet stings. And so if you could go over to patreon.com/JenkinsDota and purchase any of the tiers, not tiers as in, I'm crying, even though that is something that I do a lot with the hobo situation, but the tiers on Patreon, I would really appreciate it. So thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you, and I hope to see you in another video.